Alarms blared throughout the Defiance as the wormhole collapsed behind them, the ship's superstructure groaning under forces it was never designed to withstand. Captain Maya Chen gripped her command chair, knuckles white, as the vessel tumbled through space-time like a leaf in a hurricane. Stabilizers failing. Hull integrity at 63%. Lieutenant Okafor's voice cut through the chaos from the engineering station. "Divert emergency power to forward shields," Chen ordered, her calm voice belying the desperation of their situation. "Prepare for." The violent turbulence ceased so abruptly that several crew members were thrown forward against their stations. The view screen, previously filled with the chaotic energy patterns of the collapsing wormhole, now displayed an awe-inspiring vista. A vast purple-tinged nebula dotted with colossal geometric structures that could only be artificial. "Where the hell are we?" murmured Commander Reyes, the Defiance's XO, as he pulled himself back into his chair. "Unknown, sir," replied Navigator Wang. "Star patterns match nothing in our database. We're approximately 37,000 light-years from Earth, but that's just an estimate." Chen opened her mouth to respond when Tactical Officer Singh cut in, his voice tight. "Captain, we have company. Multiple vessels on intercept course, and they're big." The approaching ships resembled crystalline predators, their translucent hulls pulsing with internal bioluminescence. The smallest was triple the size of the Defiance, while the flagship dwarfed Earth's vessel like a whale beside a minnow. "Defensive posture," Chen ordered. "Shields maximum. Weapons hot, but do not target unless I give the command." "They're scanning us, Captain," reported Science Officer Nakamura. "Incredibly detailed scan. They're mapping our DNA, our neural patterns, everything." The view screen flickered and resolved into the image of a being unlike anything in humanity's experience. Its exoskeleton was semi-transparent, revealing pulsating organs and neural pathways glowing with electric blue energy. Multiple limbs moved with unsettling precision as compound eyes assessed the human bridge crew. "I am Grand Admiral Xorthal of the Imperial Scathrian Hegemony," announced the being, its words translated through some unknown technology. "You have committed an unforgivable transgression by entering the Emperor's sanctified nebula without permission or tribute. Identify yourselves before execution." Chen rose from her chair, straightening her uniform. "I am Captain Maya Chen of the Earth exploration vessel Defiance. We entered your space accidentally through a wormhole anomaly. We come in peace and request safe passage or directions back to our territory." The alien's exoskeleton pulsed with crimson light. "There is no accidental entry into the sanctified nebula. There is no request in the presence of the hegemony. There is only submission or destruction. Kneel and pledge your species to eternal servitude, and your lives may be spared as valuable specimens." A tense silence filled the bridge. Chen felt the weight of her crew's lives, of potentially humanity's future, pressing down on her shoulders. "With respect, Admiral," she replied carefully, "humans don't surrender our freedom that easily. We would prefer to establish diplomatic relations as equals and equals." The translator couldn't fully capture the mixture of shock and outrage in the alien's response. "There are no equals to the Scathrian. There are masters, and there are servants. Choose your category now. Primitive." Chen's spine straightened further. "Then I'm afraid we have a fundamental disagreement. We will defend ourselves if attacked, but we would strongly prefer peaceful resolution." As the Admiral's color shifted to a dangerous ultraviolet, Singh whispered, "Captain, I'm detecting unusual movement patterns in some of the smaller vessels at the formation's edge. They seem to be watching with interest. Your insolence is unprecedented." Xorthal hissed, "Perhaps a demonstration of our power will adjust your perspective." As the massive flagship's weapons ports began to glow, Chen noticed something she hadn't expected in the alien's compound eyes. Uncertainty. The quarantine habitat gleamed with an unsettling perfection. No visible seams in the opalescent walls, lighting that adjusted automatically to human circadian rhythms, and atmospheric composition precisely matched to Earth normal. Captain Chen couldn't decide if it was meant to be accommodating or if they were simply specimens being kept in optimal conditions. "They're watching us constantly," murmured Lieutenant Emma Okafor, tapping her neural implant. "I can feel something probing at the edges of my consciousness." High Scholar Ziv Terra observed the exchange through the one-way quantum viewing field, her exoskeleton pulsating with colors denoting scientific fascination. 3 days of intensive study, and these humans continued to defy explanation. She adjusted another parameter on the compliance field emitter, increasing its power by 30%, well beyond what would render any known species completely docile. Inside the habitat, Dr. Sarah Nakamura paused mid-sentence during her conversation with Engineer Petrov, blinking rapidly. "Did you feel that? Like static electricity across my scalp?" Petrov merely shrugged. "Nothing." Ziv Terra's assistant, Junior Scholar Krulvex, chittered in disbelief. "Impossible." The male didn't even notice the adjustment, and the female merely experienced mild discomfort. At this level, a Cataran would be prostrating itself unconsciously. "Their neural architecture is unlike anything in Imperial records," Ziv Terra responded, her inner chambers pulsing with excited luminescence. "No psionic network structure, no receptivity nodes. Yet somehow they maintain complex social organization and technological advancement." "Abominations," hissed Security Commander Kralvex as he entered the laboratory, his crimson war carapace gleaming under the lights. "The God Emperor has classified them as extinction-level threats. I will begin enhanced interrogation to determine the location of their homeworld." Ziv Terra's color patterns registered scientific outrage. "These specimens are under my authority for study. We know nothing about their neurological tolerances." Kralvex ignored her, activating his personal psionic amplifier and entering the airlock to the human habitat. Inside, the crew members tensed as the imposing security officer approached Lieutenant Okafor directly. "You will submit to mind probe," he stated flatly, mandibles clicking with anticipated pleasure. "Resistance brings pain." Okafor stepped backward. "I don't consent to any procedure. As our captain has stated, we're willing to communicate diplomatically, but..." Kralvex's psionic amplifier surged as he thrust his primary appendage toward her forehead. "Your consent is irrelevant, lesser being." What happened next would be reviewed thousands of times in Imperial security recordings. Instead of collapsing under the psionic assault, Okafor remained standing. More shocking still, Kralvex convulsed violently, his exoskeleton flashing chaotic color patterns before he crashed to the floor, neural pathways visibly misfiring through his translucent carapace. "What did you do to him?" gasped Ziv Terra through the habitat's communication system. "Nothing." Okafor protested, genuinely shocked. "He touched me and just collapsed." In the observation chamber, alarms blared as Kralvex's vital signs fluctuated wildly. "Neural feedback loop," muttered Junior Scholar Kralvex, examining the readings. His probe encountered no standard reception pathways and rebounded into his own system. It's as if he shouted into a cavern and the echo knocked him unconscious. While medical technicians rushed to stabilize the security commander, Engineer Petrov had made a discovery of his own. Running his hand over a seemingly solid wall, he noticed microscopic filaments responding to his touch, retracting and extending in patterns matching his finger movements. "The walls are alive," he whispered to Captain Chen. "And I think they're learning from us." That night, as most of the crew slept, Petrov carefully extracted filaments from the wall using modified medical tools. By connecting them to his personal tablet's interface, he established a rudimentary connection to the station's information network. What he found chilled him to the bone. "Captain," he whispered urgently, waking Chen in her sleeping pod, "I've accessed their secure files. Our diplomatic quarantine is a lie. We're classified as anomalous threat species, grade Alpha. The Emperor's Council is debating whether to dissect us for study or sterilize our entire region of space. Chen's expression hardened. Keep digging. We need leverage. In the adjacent laboratory, Dr. Nakamura was reaching a shocking conclusion of her own. The cellular samples taken from their Scythrian hosts contained unmistakable evidence of manipulation. Their vaunted evolutionary superiority was engineered, with embedded genetic structures designed specifically for control. What they had assumed was an alien empire was looking more like an elaborate farm. The Imperial shuttle whisked Captain Chen and Commander Reyes through the crystalline spires of the Eternal Dominion. Below them stretched habitat rings housing billions of beings from across the hegemony, all arranged in meticulous hierarchical order, from the privileged inner rings to the squalid outer sectors. "Remember," whispered their escort, Junior Diplomatic Overseer Triznar, his carapace polished to a mirror sheen for the occasion. "Do not speak unless directly addressed by His Luminance. Maintain a minimum of 3 body lengths distance from the sacred exoskeleton. And above all, when the submission chime sounds, prostrate immediately." Chen nodded politely while making no promises. The shuttle docked at an immense crystalline structure that seemed to capture and amplify the light of the nebulous stars. "The eye-opening ceremony occurs once per solar cycle," Triznar explained as they walked through corridors lined with guards whose weapons were biomechanical extensions of their own bodies. Representatives from all 1,000 subject worlds attend to renew their vows of fealty and receive the Emperor's blessing for continued existence. The Grand Hall defied human comprehension. Its ceiling soared kilometers high, with floating platforms at various elevations housing delegates from atmospherically diverse species. The walls themselves seemed alive, shifting with patterns that induced subtle vertigo in the human visitors. "Psychoactive architecture," murmured Reyes. "The patterns are designed to induce submissive states." At the far end of the hall, atop a pyramidal structure of impossible geometry, rested the Imperial throne, a construction of living crystal that pulsed with energy. The being upon it was unlike the other Scythrians they had encountered. God Emperor Skixult I appeared more energy than matter, his exoskeleton a mere framework containing swirling patterns of luminescent consciousness. The submission chime, a sound that bypassed the ears and resonated directly within the brainstem, echoed through the chamber. Throughout the hall, 1,000 different species performed elaborately choreographed prostrations. Some entities liquefied themselves entirely, flowing into ceremonial patterns on the floor. Others extended specialized appendages in ritualized patterns of surrender. "Humans," announced the Imperial Herald, voice amplified to painful levels, "approach the radiance and submit yourselves to judgment." Chen and Reyes walked forward, conscious of countless alien eyes tracking their movement. The psychoactive patterns on the walls intensified, attempting to influence their brain chemistry toward submission. The submission chime sounded again, more intense. Representatives from neighboring platforms watched eagerly for the newcomer's prostration ritual. Captain Chen stopped at the designated distance, stood perfectly straight, and extended her right hand forward in the universal human gesture of greeting. "God Emperor Skixult I bring greetings from Earth and humanity. We look forward to peaceful dialogue between our peoples." A collective gasp, expressed through various biological mechanisms, rippled through the assembly. Guards moved forward, weapons extending from their carapaces. The Emperor raised a limb almost casually, halting them. And then, the unthinkable happened. A sound emerged from the Emperor's energy form, a sound no living being had heard in centuries. Laughter. "Fascinating," came the Emperor's voice, resonating directly within the minds of all present. "In 10,000 years, no new species has stood before me thus. You shall entertain me further. You will participate in the crucible of worth." The assembly buzzed with excitement. The crucible was legendary, and no species had survived beyond the 3rd challenge in living memory. As they were escorted from the hall, a servant slipped close to Chen, pressing a small crystal into her palm. "The Chamber of Hidden Waters, third cycle," the servant whispered. "The Unbroken Ones have waited millennia for you." Back in their quarters, Reyes examined the crystal using equipment smuggled from the Defiance. It contained coordinates and 3 words in ancient Scythian script: Prophecy of Standing. The arena of judgment stretched before them, a massive oval basin carved from living crystal that shifted configurations according to each challenge. Billions watched via neural transmission across the hegemony, eager to see these strange, unbroken creatures tested and, inevitably, broken. First challenge: Endurance through pressure, announced the Master of Trials, his voice resonating through the arena. The vertebrate physiology of the human form will now demonstrate its inferiority. The transparent floor beneath Lieutenant Commander Wong began to glow as localized gravity intensified. Wong dropped to one knee as his body weight effectively tripled. "Most impressive," taunted the Master of Trials. "The Yultari typically collapse immediately. Let us proceed to real pressure." The gravity intensified again. Wong's bones creaked as his effective weight quintupled, then sextupled. Sweat poured down his face as the audience watched, anticipating his skeleton's imminent collapse. "Interesting form," observed his Scythian noble to his companion. "Notice how it redistributes its mass." Wong had spread his limbs into a push-up position, dispersing the pressure across his frame while keeping his spine aligned. His military training on Earth had included high preparation for spaceflight. He began performing push-ups, each movement deliberate and controlled. "Impossible," hissed the Master of Trials as Wong completed his 10th push-up under crushing pressure. Increased to maximum. As the gravity field intensified further, Chen watched with hidden pride. The hegemony had made a fundamental miscalculation. Earth's gravity was significantly higher than most inhabited worlds in their empire. What they considered crushing, humans considered merely strenuous. Wong completed 3 more push-ups before standing upright to thunderous silence, then walked calmly back to his team. Second challenge: Atmospheric Adaptation, the Master announced, his tone noticeably less confident. Communications specialist Fatima Nasser entered a transparent chamber where the atmosphere began rapidly cycling through various compositions. The challenge was designed to demonstrate the superiority of the universal respiratory systems of the hegemony's engineered species. What the hegemony hadn't accounted for was humanity's remarkable adaptability. Nasser, who had grown up at high elevation in the Himalayas and later trained for underwater operations, possessed extraordinary lung capacity and efficiency. As oxygen levels plummeted, she entered a state of practiced conservation, slowing her heart rate and minimizing movement. Her biochemical efficiency exceeds prediction by 47%, murmured High Scholar Zivtera, who was monitoring the tests from a privileged viewing platform. These creatures evolved on a world of extremes. The final atmospheric mix, a corrosive compound lethal to most life forms, triggered Nasser's emergency implant, releasing a protective countermeasure developed for extreme EVA situations. She emerged from the chamber breathing heavily but standing tall. Third challenge: Mental Fracture, announced the Master, mandibles clicking with anticipated pleasure. This test had broken every species previously. Dr. Nakamura entered the crystal dome at the center of the arena. Immediately, her mind was bombarded with sensory overload. Horrific visions, contradictory inputs, and emotional manipulators designed to induce psychosis. The audience leaned forward expectantly, waiting for the screams that always came. Instead, Nakamura sat cross-legged on the floor, closed her eyes, and began to regulate her breathing. "What is it doing?" demanded the Emperor from his private observation chamber. "A meditative state," reported Zivtera. "She is compartmentalizing the inputs." Nakamura had spent decades researching neural plasticity, developing techniques for mental resilience. The horrors the hegemony projected were certainly disturbing, but compared to humanity's own dark history, which she had studied extensively. They were unimaginative. When the dome lifted, Nakamura stood and bowed slightly to the audience before returning to her team. "They are passing the impossible tests," whispered Trisnar to his superior. "No species has ever completed the third challenge." "The Emperor is disturbed," replied Grand Vizier Kolgzen, his inner color patterns betraying concern. "And something else is happening. Reports indicate increased neural activity among several subject species while watching these demonstrations. In the Imperial Observation Chamber, Emperor Skixult Aida experienced something entirely new to his 10,000-year existence. Doubt. Security Chief Marcus Dalton moved silently through the maintenance corridors of the station's 47th sublevel, following the crystal's pulsing light. The coordinates had led him to an area ostensibly reserved for atmospheric processing, a section conveniently ignored by most surveillance systems. "You came alone, brave or foolish." The voice emerged from behind a cluster of biochemical processors. Dalton turned to face an ancient Scythrian, its exoskeleton dulled with age, lacking the opalescent sheen of the nobles. More shocking still, one segment appeared damaged, replaced with a mechanical prosthesis, something unheard of among the perfect ruling species. "I'm Security Chief Marcus Dalton of the Earth vessel Defiance." "And you are?" "I am Vextura, once High Scholar of Evolutionary Sciences, now Keeper of the True History." The ancient alien's inner light pulsed weakly. "And these are my fellow Unbroken Ones." From the shadows emerged representatives of 7 different species. The crystalline Elani, whose faceted bodies refracted light in hypnotic patterns. The Ursine Kadarans, physically imposing yet moving with surprising grace. The insectoid Vril, their compound eyes containing an intelligence the hegemony pretended didn't exist. Others stepped forward, species Dalton couldn't begin to identify. "For 10,000 years," continued Vextura, "we have preserved what the Emperor sought to erase. Our true heritage. Our ancestors were not primitive beings uplifted by Scythrian benevolence, but independent civilizations conquered through biological warfare and neural reprogramming." And Elani crystal being shifted forward, its voice like wind through glass. "The prophecy of standing fertile beings who could not be bent, whose minds remained their own despite the compliance field. When we witnessed your captain refuse to bow, we knew. The hegemony's psionic control network suppresses independent thought across thousands of worlds," explained Vextura. "Species are selectively bred and genetically modified for optimal compliance. But we, descendants of those who partially resisted the initial programming, have worked across generations to preserve genetic diversity and mental independence." Dalton processed this information, the security officer in him automatically cataloging strategic implications. "You're saying there's an elaborate resistance network spanning the entire empire. Cells exist on every major world," confirmed a Kataran, its voice a rumbling bass. "But we lack the means to counter the compliance field technology. We cannot free our people's minds." Meanwhile, aboard the Defiance, Engineer Petrov and Dr. Nakamura hunched over components salvaged from their quarters. Using the biotech filaments Petrov had extracted from the walls, they had constructed a rudimentary interface with the station's systems. "If my theory is correct," whispered Nakamura, making a final adjustment, "the compliance field operates on specific neural frequencies. This device should generate a localized disruption field." Petrov activated the device. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, a maintenance drone passing their doorway suddenly stopped, its behavioral programming temporarily disrupted. It hovered erratically before resuming its predetermined path. "It works," breathed Petrov. "At least on automated systems slave to the central network." "The range is limited," cautioned Nakamura. "Perhaps 10 meters maximum, but it's proof of concept." Neither noticed Lieutenant Pavel Sokolov watching from the corridor. His eyes narrowed in calculation. In his private quarters, Sokolov activated the secret communication device provided by Court Inquisitor Krellmore. His hands trembled slightly, not from fear, but from the memory of crushing gambling debts that had made him vulnerable to the Inquisitor's approach. The engineer and doctor have created some kind of disruption technology, he reported, and Dalton has made contact with dissidents in the lower levels. Excellent, purred Krellmore's voice. Continue monitoring. The Emperor remains fascinated by these creatures, but I will show them for the threat they truly are. Your reward will be substantial. Sokolov terminated the communication, a hollow feeling in his chest. Betrayal had seemed an abstraction in the safety of Earth space. Here, surrounded by an alien empire, it felt considerably more consequential. The pieces were moving, and the hegemony's 10,000-year status quo trembled on the precipice of change. Captain Chen jolted awake to the sound of alarm klaxons and the harsh glow of emergency lighting. Commander Reyes burst through her door, face grim. They've taken Dalton and the others. Compliance troops everywhere. Through the habitat's viewing panels, Chen watched armored Skthrian enforcers dragging resistance members across the main concourse. Among them, she recognized Vextura's distinctive form, his mechanical prosthesis damaged and sparking. How did they know about the meeting? Chen demanded, her mind racing through possibilities. We have a traitor, Rice confirmed, his voice low. Lieutenant Okafor traced the transmission. It was Sokolov. A squad of enforcers approached their habitat, bioweapons extended. The door membrane dissolved as Court Inquisitor Krellmore strode in, his carapace pulsing with triumphant colors. Captain Maya Chen, you are charged with conspiracy against the God Emperor, attempted subversion of Imperial control systems, and communicating with known genetic deviants. You will be ceremonially executed at the commencement of tomorrow's final Crucible challenge. Chen maintained eye contact with the Inquisitor as enforcers secured her hands with living restraints that squirmed uncomfortably against her skin. And my crew. They will witness your execution, then compete in the final challenge, a scenario designed to demonstrate the ultimate superiority of hegemony engineering. Krellmore's mandibles clicked in what Chen had learned to recognize as amusement. We have been most accommodating to your primitive species, but the time for curiosities has ended. As they led Chen away, she caught a glimpse of Sokolov, standing apart from the other crew members, unable to meet anyone's eyes. In the detention level, Chen found herself in a cell opposite Vextura. The ancient Skthrian's internal luminescence had dimmed to a faint flicker. I apologize for failing your resistance before it began, Chen said softly. Vextura's compound eyes focused on her with effort. 10,000 years of waiting, human. What is one setback? His voice faltered. But the compliance field disruptor your people were developing. It represented our first real hope. Chen's eyes narrowed. The prototype. Did they find it? The Inquisitor confiscated all materials from your quarters. A faint smile touched Chen's lips, but not from Dr. Nakamura's neural implant, where she stored the schematics. Meanwhile, in the arena preparation chambers, Commander Reyes gathered the remaining crew as they prepared for the final challenge. The tension was thick enough to cut with a knife, with several crew members casting murderous glances at Sokolov, who stood isolated in a corner. We know the final challenge is rigged, Reyes said quietly. They've designed it specifically to humiliate us before execution, but we're going to use their broadcast against them. Dr. Nakamura stepped forward, her expression intense. I've rebuilt the disruptor using components from our environmental suits. The range is limited, but if we can access the arena's neural transmission hub, we could potentially broadcast the destruction effect to everyone watching. You'll never reach the transmission hub, Sokolov said suddenly. All eyes turned to him, hostile. He swallowed hard. But I can get you there. I know the access codes. Why would you help us now? Demanded Lieutenant Okafor, her voice cold. "Because I realized something watching the Inquisitor celebrate our capture," Sokolov replied, his voice barely above a whisper. "If humans bow now, we'll be bowing forever." In the execution chamber, Captain Chen stood before the Emperor's dissolver, a device designed to break down a body-one neural connection at a time for maximum spectacle. The God Emperor himself had deigned to attend, his energy form pulsating with anticipation. "Any final words, human, before you serve as an example to all who would defy natural order?" The Emperor's voice resonated directly in her mind. Chen smiled. "Just that humans have a saying. The show isn't over until the last act." At that precise moment, throughout the station, the crew activated Nakamura's modified disruptor, broadcasting through the hegemony's own neural network. The compliance field faltered, and for the first time in millennia, thousands of minds experienced clarity. Chen watched the Emperor's energy form flicker with sudden uncertainty as his guards hesitated, caught between genetic compulsion and their first taste of free will. Chaos erupted throughout the Eternal Dominion. The disruption field, amplified through the hegemony's own psionic network, created cascading failures in control systems across the station. In habitation sectors, members of a dozen species stood motionless, experiencing genuine free thought for the first time in generations. Captain Chen seized her moment. As the Emperor's guards wavered in confusion, she wrenched free of her restraints. The living bonds, momentarily disconnected from central control, had loosened their grip. She grabbed a ceremonial staff from a paralyzed attendant and smashed the control panel of Vextura's cell. "Your resistance waited 10 millennia," she said, helping the ancient Scathrian to his feet. "Time to make it count." Across the station, other captives were similarly escaping. The Alani resistance members used their crystalline bodies to refract the disruption field, amplifying its effect in key security sectors. Kataran warriors, their genetically imposed docility temporarily suspended, overwhelmed confused guard units with natural strength that had been suppressed for generations. Emperor Skixalt I's energy form pulsed with chaotic patterns as he retreated to his secure chambers. Containment protocols, he commanded, his voice now broadcast conventionally rather than psionically. "Initiate purge sequence." In the arena preparation area, Commander Reyes led his team through maintenance corridors, following Sokolov's directions. They encountered Imperial troops in disarray, some fighting with mechanical precision, others standing confused, and some actively turning against their commanders. "The disruption isn't complete," warned Dr. Nakamura, monitoring readings on her implant. "The effect varies based on individual resistance and proximity. We need to reach the Defiance before they restore control." A massive explosion rocked the station, sending them stumbling against the walls. "The Emperor has activated self-destruct sequences," Sokolov explained, steadying himself. He'd rather destroy the seat of his power than lose control of it. Lieutenant Okafor hacked into a nearby information terminal. "Evacuation has begun. We have less than 30 minutes before catastrophic failure." "The Defiance is in docking bay 17, said Reyes. "But we're not leaving without the captain." Meanwhile, Chen and Vextura had gathered escaped resistance members and were fighting their way toward the station's central core. "The Emperor will sacrifice billions to maintain the illusion of infallibility," Vextura explained between labored breaths. "The self-destruct can only be aborted from the central nexus." They rounded a corner to find their path blocked by Court Inquisitor Krulmore and a squad of elite guards whose neural implants had been shielded against the disruption effect. "Predictable," sneered the Inquisitor, attempting to save lives at the cost of certain victory. Before Chen could respond, a barrage of energy fire struck the Inquisitor's squad from behind. Grand Admiral Sorthul stepped forward, his carapace battle-scared, leading a contingent of naval officers. "The fleet will no longer serve a ruler who would destroy his own people," the Admiral announced, his compound eyes fixed on Chen. "Your defiance showed us a different path." Outside the station, A three-way battle had erupted in space. The Admiral's defecting vessels exchanged fire with loyal Imperial ships, while opportunistic warlords seized the chance to attack both sides. Escape pods and shuttles fled the doomed station by the thousands. Chen led the combined human-alien force through the final security checkpoint into the central nexus. The massive chamber housed the biological-technological heart of the station, a quantum computer merged with cloned neural tissue of the first Emperor. "The abort sequence requires genetic authorization from royal lineage," said Vextura despairingly. Before anyone could respond, the Emperor himself materialized in the chamber, his energy form now contained within a combat exoskeleton of terrible power. "You would steal my empire, human," his voice thundered. "I have ruled for 10,000 years. I have engineered the evolution of 1,000 species. I will not be denied." The Emperor's combat form surged with devastating energy as evacuation countdown klaxons wailed throughout the station. Billions of lives hung in the balance as Chen stepped forward to face a being who had played God for millennia. "Your reign wasn't 10,000 years of rule," she said calmly. "It was 10,000 years of fear. That ends today." 1 year later, Admiral Maya Chen stood on the observation deck of the Alliance flagship Unity, watching the swirling colors of the Haven Nebula, formerly known as the Emperor's Sanctified Nebula. The massive vessel, a hybrid of human ingenuity and Scythian living technology, represented something unprecedented in this region of space: cooperation without coercion. "The delegates are assembled, Admiral," announced Commander Reyes, now her XO. 23 species representatives await your address." Chen nodded, straightening her new uniform. The final confrontation with Emperor Skixold I had left its marks. A lattice of energy-burned scars along her left arm and a neural implant, where Scythian technology had been necessary to save her life after the Emperor's attack. The combat had been brutal, but ultimately it wasn't violence that had defeated the Emperor. It had been choice. When Grand Admiral Sorfol's daughter, a royal heir by blood, had stepped forward in that final moment to authorize the self-destruct override, she had done what no Scythian had done in 10 millennia. She had chosen a different path. The Emperor, witnessing his own bloodline's rejection, had suffered a catastrophic feedback loop in his mental energy matrix. His combat exoskeleton still stood in the Alliance Memorial Hall, empty and powerless, a reminder that even gods can fall. Chen entered the Great Assembly, where representatives of the Free Alliance waited. Some stood on legs, others floated in suspension fields, some existed as pure energy within containment suits, and the gaseous Mareth hovered as colorful clouds above specialized translation devices. Diversity, once hidden behind enforced conformity, now flourished openly. 1 year ago, Chen began, different species throughout this region of space experienced genuine choice for the first time in countless generations. Today, we formalize what began in that moment of freedom. The Alliance Charter projected in the center of the chamber, written in 23 different languages. It enshrined principles that would have been incomprehensible under the hegemony: self-determination, cultural preservation, and mutual defense without mental subjugation. As representatives approached to make their marks, by signature, thumbprint, tentacle impression, or molecular code, Chen spotted familiar faces among the crowd. Dr. Nakamura, now leading a joint research initiative to permanently neutralize remaining compliance field technology. Lieutenant Okafor, her neural implant enhancements, making her uniquely qualified to help former slave species reclaim their technological heritage. And Sokolov, who had earned a path to redemption by sacrificing himself to save a shipload of Elani children during the evacuation. Not all was peaceful in the former hegemony. The God Emperor's loyalists still controlled substantial territory. Warlords had carved out fiefdoms in the power vacuum. But something new had taken root, something no one had imagined possible before a human ship had tumbled through a wormhole and refused to submit. Later, as the Defiance, now refitted and upgraded, prepared for its journey back to Earth with Alliance representatives aboard. Chen ran her hand along the plaque that had been mounted near the ship's airlock. It bore words from her confrontation with the Emperor, now immortalized across Alliance worlds. The true measure of an advanced civilization is not how many kneel before you, but how many stand beside you. The ship's enhanced drive systems hummed to life as Chen took her place on the bridge. Their mission was crucial: establish contact with Earth and create a stable wormhole route before the weakened but still dangerous remnants of the hegemony could locate humanity's homeworld. "Course laid in, Admiral," reported Navigator Wang. "Engage," Chen ordered, watching the nebula's swirling colors through the view screen. "Let's show Earth what standing together looks like." As the Defiance accelerated toward the coordinates where they had first arrived, Chen reflected that humans hadn't just wandered into an empire's heart. They had helped give birth to something entirely new, a future where no one needed to bow.